Akaza couldn't even think for the next of those few days, until the meeting they were to leave for. It was some sort of insanity that had taken over his mind, one built of an eternity of different emotions he didn't believe he could ever have. He had become restless. And Yen. It was so unusual, what had happened. What he was feeling, though it didn't entirely feel new to him. It was as though his body, his heart remembered something about this feeling that his mind simply couldn't. Maybe from a time in which he'd been human. He wasn't sure. But supposedly, that was what made his sensations all the more addicting to him. She was an addiction of sorts, one that had grown over time, consumming his focus on his strength and power. Akaza wanted to be around her, to be close to her. It was almost painful when he found himself away from the young assassin. It was hunger that had grown to consume him, a hunger not to only eat her, but to feel her, to have his mouth brushing on her own, to have his hands touching her simple skin, the skin in which he hadn't made another move to touch, despite the desire and hunger he felt for Yin in return. But the thought of the feeling towards this human woman was not the only thing keeping him restless. No. There was a much bigger dilemma changing straight ahead. It gawked at him, the thought of this up-and-coming meeting. The fact that he was to bring the young assassin along. It was a thought that his instincts were screaming at him to keep her away from his comrades. Despite her own strength, she would be dead in a matter of seconds if she were to upset any demon. It wasn't only that, though. They both had roles to play when it comes to this meeting. And that was perhaps the most terrifying thing of it all to him. Doma's words haunted him, focusing Akaza to stay near her. It angered him more than he personally would have liked. A human girl. The warmth of the sun kissed my face through the small window of my bedroom, the midday afternoon light soaking in the room in a glow in which I hadn't seen in what felt like so long. It had been 2 days since what had happened with Akaza, 2 days since he took me home and revealed to me what his demon meeting would consist of. I hugged my knees to my chest, willing the sun to thaw the blood that had frozen within my veins with the demon's words. I wasn't scared. That was one thing I knew for certain. It was Akaza who was worried. He hadn't tried to make any other moves towards me since our time in the forest. He was becoming distant again. Angry, frustrated, though his longing for me still rang true in his gaze, as well as the fact that he always stayed near me, as if he was mere frightened for this meeting. Not for himself, of course, but for me. It was an odd thing to have come across, the realization that he truly did care. He had informed me of what was to partake tomorrow, and though I was not entirely scared, I knew I should be, despite my profound. Even so, Akaza's newfound emotions had stirred up my own nerves, swirling inside my mind and preventing me from getting proper sleep ever since. It was why I was now sat at my window, watching the sun lower ever so slightly, as if telling me not to worry just yet, that there was simply plenty of time within the day. We were to leave tomorrow night. I rubbed my eyes, adjusting my position before getting to my feet. My ears had begun to ring, an ache growing behind my tired eyes. I wanted to sleep. But even so, there was too much upon my scattered mind to be able to do so. And so I simply decided to stay awake until I ended up passing out, whatever that may be, which more or less wouldn't seem to be anytime soon. Although I wasn't even that hungry to begin with, I decided that a distraction of food was probably the best way to go. I left my room, entering the makeshift kitchen downstairs. Unlike my room currently, there was no sunlight streaming through down below, which wasn't entirely surprising considering the demon I found sitting on the floor, almost waiting for me. His back was facing me, legs crossed underneath him. I studied him for a moment, despite knowing the fact that he probably already knew I was behind him. The ripples of his back muscles were hardly concealed by the thin cloth of the vest he always wore. Similar marks to that of his body etched into the pink fabric. His form was moving softly, as if breathing at a controlled rate. I frowned slightly. Concentrated breathing. I didn't know Akaza would even do such a thing. In a state of what seemed to be meditation, I attempted to take a step forward, not entirely wanting to anger him if I was to interrupt anything personal. I almost scoffed at myself. His tongue had been down my throat mere days ago. I figured that was probably the most personal interaction he'd ever encountered before. The thought allowed my memory to resurface. The smoothness of his tongue, the softness of his lips, as they always carried mine. A thunderous beat began to grow in my body, and I had to shake the thought from me as I approached him. "Could you not sleep?" I heard him say faintly. I paused, wincing before letting out a nervous laugh. "Yeah, something like that." He turned to me, jerking his head to instant as I came to sit over with him. I obliged, taking a seat beside him and crossing my legs myself. I stared at the fire that sat before us, the flames dancing in his eyes that were so familiar to his color. Yet there was hardly much warmth within his gaze. It was hard to tell what exactly the emotion was. Our knees brushing up against one another, and I became all too aware of how close his powerful form was to my own. "What are you doing?" I asked gently, peering sidelong at him. His smile softened, his lips tugging upwards. The relief that spread through me at the look made my heart begin to speed up. Of course it was. I surely felt the urge to kiss him hard against his mouth. I felt my own face heat as I tore my gaze away from him. Something about Akaza had always irritated me, something besides his power. There was just something in ethereal comfort that it came to him, and it was enough to make me want him profoundly. "Just thinking," he responded, finally looking at me fully. I paused, meeting his intense gaze. It was always God-demanding eyes that struck me. From the very beginning, his golden gaze had become a beacon for me. It was hard to think around my desire for him sometimes, the fact that he had begun to mean so much for me. What had it even happened? I trusted him. That was much true. A demon. A word meant nothing to me now, and I stared at him. I knew deep down he was not human, but I suppose that made me all the more attached to him. I'd been around humans for far too long, cruel, disappointing humans who had done so much worse than a demon before the one in front of me. He was a demon, yes, a monster to some, but so was I. "About the meeting again?" I inquired, not breaking his comforting stare. He shrugged. "There's a lot to be thinking about as of now." I wasn't entirely sure of what that was supposed to mean, but the roughness in his voice sent goosebumps along my exposed skin. Akaza wanted to take his time, to experience whatever it was between us properly. I smiled at the thought, leaning my head against his shoulder. I felt him stiffen, not moving for a few moments before he stifled, attempting to get more comfortable by placing his powerful arm around my lower back, blue fingers grazing my clothing. "Are you sure we don't need to train anymore before we leave?" I then asked, his grip tightening around me, and my heart gave a twist at the perfectness he was beginning to show. "No, you are more than capable." I smiled, reaching up to pat his tattooed cheek. "See, there's nothing else to be worried about." I huffed, trying to lighten his mood. "I can almost definitely kill demons if that's what needed." Akaza raised a brow, looking down at my face that currently rested against his shoulder. "You truly aren't scared," he said. I couldn't tell if he meant the meeting or himself. "No, you know that I'm not." Whatever it was, I knew my answer was the same. "You remember the role we will have to play, the act we must put on." I sighed, my chest tightening. "Of course." "And do you remember?" "Akaza," I said, bringing my hand up to his face once more. "You don't have to worry about this. About me. I can handle myself." His gaze flickers at the tenderness in my tone, and then looked down at my lips. "I do have to worry," he mumbled, watching my face ever so closely. "I don't know why." "Because you simply can't handle the thought of your precious protégé getting injured, can you?" I teased. He looked at me with a thickened look, not taking up my sarcasm. "Exactly." I huffed, shaking my head and looking away. But back at the flickering fire, after a few moments of silence, I spoke up once more. "How many demons will be there again?" I asked. Akaza let out a long breath. "It's hard to tell. The upper moons, at least. But even then, I'm not sure which of us will be present, aside from Master." I felt my spine stiffen. "Your master?" He nodded, his jaw visibly tightening. "I didn't know he was to attend as well," I muttered, watching his face for any hidden details. Akaza wouldn't meet my eyes. "He will be there." His tone was different, something bittersweet almost. Admiration and fear. I swallowed. Maybe he would actually be worth some effort on my part, I said, picking at my nails for show. Maybe a worthy opponent for someone like me. Akaza growled. I would watch your mouth. I peered up at him, cocking a brow. I was joking. When his stiffness didn't ease up any further, I let out a long breath, bringing my finger to rub the frown away from between his brows. He relaxed slightly at the touch, his eyes closing. I'm sorry, he whispered. I smiled softly, even if he couldn't see it. I understand why you're stressed over such a thing, but we have an entire day before we have to leave, a day in which we can do anything. He opened an eye, pausing as a grin graced his lips. Anything? Mm-hmm, I mumbled, bringing my finger to delicately trace over his tattoos. It was an action I noticed he'd grown to like quite intensely. As I started to trace over his face, it only took a few more moments before he moved in closer, his head tilting down towards mine, and I froze at the distance between us. One single movement and his lips would be on my own once more. I looked into his golden gaze, seeing the question laid out for me. I tilted my head, smiling at him reassuring. Can I? He asked, the breathless state of him creating a pool of heat within my body. I bit my lip, nodding before lowering my gaze to his pale lips, aching to touch him once more. His frown reflected the exact same desire as my own. I wasn't sure which one of us moved first, but the next thing I knew, the feeling of desire had begun to roar through me, my stomach twisting with it as his soft mouth explored my own. Softly, so painfully soft, that I had to hold myself back from kissing him harder. My heart was racing, my lower stomach building with need, an ache that felt incredible at the moment. Akaza broke away, eyes flickering towards my own. I don't want you at that meeting, he said, a sort of sadness entering his gaze. He sounded more desperate than angry. Do you trust me? I asked, tilting my head. He hesitantly, for a moment. I do. Then there is nothing to worry about. He kissed me again, just once, before mumbling against my mouth. It's not you that I don't trust, love. It's... He didn't need to finish his sentence for me to get the gist of it. He didn't trust anyone else at the meeting. He kissed me again, a bit harder, his tongue brushing up against my lips in eagerness. I had to hide my wine that I had built up in my throat. He moved off of my mouth, trailing down towards my jaw, my neck, under the sensitive part of my ear. Each gentle whisper of his touch sent fireworks off, like a spark of something echoing as soon as he brushed up against my skin. I leaned back, savoring it. It was insane, how much I wanted him. As though the demon at my throat could read my thoughts, he mumbled against my skin, sharp canines poking at it. You have no idea how difficult this is for me, dear. He dragged his teeth across my neck. One move and I'd be dead. I froze, enjoying the moment casually. It's so frustrating. The wanting to be near you at all time. To be close to you. He then puts his lips back over my skin, gently sucking. Like this. I almost gasped as he licked the spot in which his teeth came so close to poking through. It was an etched sort of response, a mix of danger and desire. Alarm bells of sorts came running through. Do you feel it too? Akaza asked, pink eyelashes fluttering against my jaw as he explored. All I could do was nod. Some days I don't want to fight at all, he said, the seductiveness in his tone causing a bit. I drew back slightly. I simply find myself wanting to be around you in this way. I stared at him before smiling. You sound like that's a bad thing. He frowned. It shouldn't be, but it doesn't feel that way to me. I was silent for a few moments before speaking. I know the feeling, and I understand. I brought his mouth back upon my own just once. I'm not entirely sure how to say this. I should not feel the way I do for you, I began, to care for you. He only watched me. But you saved me, Akaza, I said, looking back up at him. You saved me so many ways that sometimes it feels impossible for me not to care about you. How could I not? I am a demon, and I am an assassin. I grinned. I suppose we're both monsters in our own way. Akaza tilted his head, frowning slightly. When I saw you all those months ago, he he started. There was a reason in which I broke my rule for you. The rule in which I would never kill or eat a woman. A slight pause in which I sensed was coming. I saw you slice through a group of people as though they were nothing. I never came across a woman who would do such a thing. Akaza met my gaze. A spark grew inside me at the sight, and it was then I had realized something. What was that? I asked, a bit breathlessly. I would never harm a woman out of pure respect. But you, I attacked you afterwards because I respect you the most. I scrunched my brows together, a bit confused. You are a woman worthy of me, and equal to me in ways I hadn't even sure to yet, not until I'd met you fully. It was the first time in which I'd ever gone after someone of the female gender. Akaza seemed to be lost at his own thoughts. You still kick my ass, though, I teased. He grinned at me. Of course, but even then I knew that potential laid beneath you, underneath the rage and sorrow. I wasn't sure why, but my sister's face flashed at his words. My heart twisted a bit. He must have been seeing the change, for his hands delicately came to rest upon my cheeks, forcing me to look at him. Come, he whispered, before the conversation took a different route. You should rest before tomorrow. I nodded slightly at his words ringing throughout my mind even as he walked me back to my room. A comfortable silence had taken over since we'd left the downstairs area, and it reminded me until I spoke up once more, eventually seated alongside my bedroll and stopped from leaving the room once he deemed me comfortable. Akaza? He turned to me, narrowing his gaze. Can you stay? Although I probably could have slept easily enough, I wasn't sure why I asked it. He tilted his head. You wish for me to stay? I rolled over into my bed, feeling my face heat as I nodded, mumbling into the pillow. Was that really embarrassing to ask him? The next thing I knew, his body was pressed up against my own, and I opened my eyes to find him laying beside me. As I stared up at him, I felt that maybe he decided not to stay simply because I wanted him, but perhaps because he needed to stay as well, for himself. That thought made me smile. Though we hardly touched each other, the comfort of his presence was more than enough. It seemed to be enough for him as well, for his body seemed to relax quite a bit more after the minutes of silence went by. I could feel my exhaustion returning, but I still found myself scanning the room, the tiny place in Akaza's townhouse. By tomorrow night, we'd be gone. We would leave the tiny house behind. My heart stinged slightly at the thought, knowing that things would surely be a lot more different the second we walked out that door. Though I suppose that we'd become different from the moment Akaza had kissed me. As if could read my thoughts, I felt his lips brush against my forehead, his arm bringing me a bit closer. His smell covered over me, the scent losing the tingling of my chest at the beginning to fill it up. I eased into his chest, even if he did seem a bit confused on how to hold me properly. I put my arm across his abdomen, resting my hands above his chest as he held me. I felt his breath hitch, and I hid my smile. Even if we were mere to leave this place tomorrow, the birthplace of something new had forged to the both of us, the feeling that had still stinged the two of us long after we leave the premise. At least, I hope so. Having Akaza hold me had begun to make me realize something else. I wasn't scared of the meeting, or the demons. I was scared of change. The change that would and could happen between us. The change that could occur for me, for him. I shook the thought from my mind, cursing myself for overthinking. Change wasn't edible, good or bad. Nothing would ever stay the same. He gave me a bit tighter. Squeeze, as if he had his own thoughts rushing through him. We'd still have each other, though. The demon I cared for, despite leaving, the connection between us wouldn't change. Akaza will always still be there. Right?